All right, well, good morning, and thank you for joining us for this informational webinar in regards to the Michelson Spark Grants OER funding cycle. My name is Ryan Erickson Kulas. I'm the programs director here at Michelson 20MM. I am part of our grant committee, and I will let my colleague Kaylin introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Kaylin Nagel. I'm the OER program manager and also part of the committee.
So just a quick overview of the agenda for today. First, I will just talk broadly about the Michelson 20MM Foundation for those of you who aren't familiar with our work. Then we'll discuss the specifics of our Spark grant program. We'll do an overview of what our review process looks like. We'll highlight some previous awardees so that you all can get a sense of the types of work and the types of projects that we fund. And at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A. There is a Q&A feature, so please, if you have questions, direct your questions there. Again, we'll be looking at that at the end of this presentation and answer any questions. This conversation will be recorded, and those of you in attendance or if you've registered will receive a copy of that recording as well as a copy of this deck via email within the next 48 hours or so. So a little bit of history about the Michelson 20MM Foundation. Our organization was founded and funded by Dr. Gary K. Michelson. Dr. Michelson made his fortune in the practice of medicine. He actually invented medical devices and then patented those devices. He's retired from medicine and now devotes himself to philanthropy. Our organization is one of a group of organizations that makes up the Michelson Philanthropies family. Our organization is primarily focused on higher education and helping students to be successful within higher education. Dr. Michelson also funds an animal welfare organization, a medical research organization, in addition to other work to better our world. Dr. Michelson really got his start in thinking about higher education based on a newspaper article that he saw over a decade ago talking about students at Santa Ana College in California who were unable to complete their educational journey because of the high cost of textbooks. At the time, he created a scholarship to address the issue, but he realized that that didn't address the root of the problem. And so about 11 years ago, he made a grant to OpenStax, which at the time was just in its kind of seedling form, and now is the largest nonprofit OER publisher and has over 40 titles. Since then, our work has grown to a variety of different initiatives. And really what we're looking to do is create a more just world for all students and really allow individuals and humanity to fulfill their full potential through both educational as well as economic opportunities. So how do we do that? Well, as I mentioned, Dr. Michelson got his fortune in inventing medical devices and then patenting those. And so he's very passionate about bringing intellectual property education to the masses. We, as an organization, have the Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property, which partners with undergraduate institutions, graduate institutions, maker spaces to provide IP education to students, faculty, entrepreneurs, inventors, so that they can similarly capitalize on their IP, as Dr. Michelson did. We also have an arm of our organization that does impact investing. So these are targeted investments, generally within the ed tech space, that are mission aligned with the work that the foundation looks to do. These investments are equity investments in for-profit companies, and those companies are generally working to better the world for students, making students' lives easier and making them more successful within higher education. The other three areas of our work that I'll touch on briefly before we dive into our open educational resources work are the three other initiatives within our educational access and success portfolio. The first is digital equity. So really when the pandemic started, I think we and a lot of other nonprofits, organizations, policymakers realized that the digital divide has always existed, and it is even exacerbated during a time when people needed to be staying at home, working remotely, learning remotely. And so our digital equity initiative looks to end the digital divide, particularly for students within California. Our Smart Justice initiatives looks at the intersection of the higher education system and the criminal justice system, and looks to provide support both for students who are currently incarcerated as well as formerly incarcerated, to allow them to be successful within their educational journeys. We also look to provide career and vocational pathways and training for that population. And then lastly, our Student Basic Needs Initiative. That looks at addressing systemic barriers that students are facing that do not allow them to persist and graduate. Housing insecurity, food insecurity, just to name a few. And I'll turn it over to Kaylin to talk a little bit about our Open Educational Resources Initiative, which y'all are here for today.
So when it comes to the Open Educational Resource Initiative, we know that open is one of the best ways to increase access to course materials. But beyond that, we know that the potential of open can be much broader. It can increase the prevalence of culturally relevant materials. It increases equity in the classroom, and we've seen how it increases student success. So we work on programs that increase the adoption of OER in the classroom and make it easier for faculty to do that, but also to work to improve affordability in course materials overall, equitable access to course materials, and the kind of create a more fair course material landscape. And then when it comes to the Spark grant aspect of that, we want to provide highly impactful grants with a quick turnaround. So the program is 6 weeks between the proposal and the proposal's closing and the final decision. So the proposals open May 17th and they close June 1st. And we're looking for things that are innovative, just-in-time grant making that fulfills urgent needs that the organizations are facing. In addition to that, some of the other things to think about is one, we are looking for US-based nonprofits that have a focus on California, and the grants must impact California at least partially. And then we're looking for solutions that are scalable. I think that some of the grants we've given in the past really illustrate this point. And we're not currently looking to fund the development of new open educational resources or authoring these resources at the time. And it is also okay if your program or the project that you're working on currently is part of a larger project with multiple funding streams. That's totally okay.
Thanks, Kaylin. One other thing that I'll mention that I forgot to include on this deck, obviously we are open to funding educational institutions. Generally, we work with the foundations based at those educational institutions to route those dollars. So, a nonprofit organization or an educational institution. And I saw that someone put a Q&A in the Q&A section, which makes me very happy. I will definitely be looking at that at the end. So again, as people are having questions throughout this presentation, please drop them in the Q&A and we will add them to the end of the conversation. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we evaluate, proposals that come in within the Spark Grant program. And generally, we are looking at a few different dimensions of evaluation. Do they meet the baseline criteria? Are they aligned with the focus areas? What's the potential impact of the grant? How is an organization looking to measure that impact? what's the long-term sustainability of the organization, and what's the scalability of the project. And we're going to go a little bit more into depth in each of these right now. So in terms of baseline criteria, generally, we are looking for grants that are up to $25,000. And generally, we're looking for grants that cover a specific milestone or a specific project. So the Spark Grant program currently does not fund general operating expenses. However, it would fund a new program or an expansion of a program, or perhaps a pilot program that you're looking to scale up over the long term. As Kaylin shared, we are very open to our dollars being combined in a larger project with other dollars. It would be helpful for us to get a better sense of how exactly our dollars would be utilized within that larger project. And I'll turn it over to Kaylin to talk a little bit about the specific things that we're looking to fund for this cycle when it comes to OER.
So first, kind of building on past work that the foundation has funded, we're looking to expand and kind of fill the gaps of understanding of the scope and size of the practice of automatic textbook billing within the state of California. So automatic textbook billing is when institutions add the cost of course materials directly to a student's bill. And this goes by all sorts of proprietary names, from inclusive access to equitable access to first day access. We'd like to understand how widespread these programs are in the state and what the scope of them is. So we are also looking to support programs that are implementing the California's historic investment in zero textbook cost degree pathways. So this past year, Governor Newsom added $115 million to the budget to support these pathways. It builds on previous funding in 2016, the idea being that students can graduate without having to spend money on textbooks, and these degrees are supported through using open educational resources primarily. In addition to that, we are looking for, one of the other aspects is programs that are public education programs targeting national media to increase the broader understanding of textbook affordability and open educational resources. There has been an increase of understanding within higher education. There's still a long way to go there, but if we want to make sure that the general public understands these problems, and so do policymakers, then we have to look out beyond media that is focused on higher education and into things that have broad public impacts. We are also looking to understand the use and collection of student data within courseware and digital textbooks. A lot of courses and course materials have moved online, which means that education technology companies and publishers are collecting much more student data, but there's not a lot of public understanding of how that data is used, how it's stored. And for students, there's not really a way to get out of it. So we're also looking for projects that expand the understanding of the public and kind of educate people on how these programs are collecting student data, or look into how these programs are collecting student data. And then we're also looking at programs that identify the impacts that OER has on student outcomes, including retention and success. And then preference will be given to looking into how OER impacts students from historically marginalized backgrounds, return on investment for institutions, and long-term student success. So some of the things that we're also going to be looking at, in addition to the focus areas, is how many individuals would the grant impact, kind of get a sense of the scale. What is the best and worst case? And then how likely do you think this program will be successful? And then are there existing resources? What place does this play into the overall budget versus the grants ask? And then I think that one of the things that I think has been really successful with some of our past funding, it has been programs that have been able to create a place where people can really take what they were able to do and run with it. So how effective is the proposed metric for measuring the success? What is the impact that it's going to have more in the long term, or what do you think that it could be? And what is the timeline for the project?
Thanks, Galen. I'll wrap up with these last two. So we're also looking at an organization and what the long-term sustainability of an organization looks like, but more importantly, who are the team that makes up the organization? We want to get a better sense of who are the staff who are going to be working on this project, what's the experience that they bring to the table. And generally, and we'll talk a little bit about how this process works, but those deeper questions will come across in the full application, which we invite individuals to based on the LOI or letter of interest that they submit. We're also very curious about partnerships that y'all may have that you would be utilizing for the grant. And then lastly, we're looking at, what are your current revenue streams? How is your organization sustained? What other grant funding may you potentially have that aligns with this particular project that you're proposing? And then lastly, sorry about that. We're looking at scalability. So we're really interested in projects that maybe it's not with our dollars, but beyond the grant cycle, beyond the kind of project, has the ability to have impact at scale. Generally, when we think of scale, we think of across the state of California, maybe across multiple regions of California. Maybe something starts at one particular school within the California higher education systems, but the goal long-term is to scale that across, and a Spark grant is funding the initial work, the initial pilot, etc. So now just kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of our process. So our portal will open on May 17th. And we'll be accepting proposals until June 1st. The website is 20mm.org/spark-grants. This is what you will see. Obviously, the dates will be different. And you'll click that submit a proposal button to submit your LOI. This is currently not live. However, on the website, if you go there right now, you'll be able to download PDF versions of both the LOI and the full application. So if you wanted to get a jump on those documents, if you know you're going to submit an LOI, you can start working on that. It's just the portal to submit won't be open until May 17th. When someone submits an LOI, we'll invite them to apply for a full application. And some of the questions that we ask in the full application will be based on what we receive within the LOI. LOIs are reviewed on an ongoing basis. So, if you submit your proposal on May 17th, most likely within a week or so, we'll have reviewed that and we'll have let you know whether or not you're moving forward to a full application. I would certainly encourage you to apply early. Generally, we see a glut of kind of stuff coming in at the early end, stuff coming in at the end. But obviously, if you have earlier proposals coming in, it gives us more time to evaluate them. And then you will get a copy of the proposal when you submit it. We utilize a grant management system called Submittable. So again, when you click that submit a proposal button, it will bring you to Submittable. You'll create an account. One of the things that you'll want to make sure you do, and there are instructions to this in the grant LOI that you complete, is to whitelist Submittable as an email client. One of the things that we've heard from partners that we've worked with in the past is that emails and notifications are going to their spam, they're not receiving them. So please make sure, if you are submitting a proposal, you do that. Communications will be occurring through Submittable. And I just dropped a link as to how to whitelist that into the chat. And then finally, any sort of technical issues that you're having in terms of applying or things like that. I mean, certainly if there are questions about your LOI, we can answer those, but we are not equipped to deal with any technical issues that you're having with Submittable. So you can email support@submittable.com and they'll be able to help you with those. So obviously, Kaylin and I have already introduced ourselves, but two other individuals who will be making up our grant committee are Phil Kim, who's our CEO and has been with the organization for a decade now, and then Myra Lombera, our Chief Operating Officer, who has also been part of our organization for over a decade. And then I'll turn it over to Kaylin. We have a new aspect of our Spark grant program this year, our Spark community advisors. So I'll let Kaylin talk a little bit about how they'll be incorporated into the process and about their background.
So the community advisors we started by getting feedback from this community on the focus areas that we're doing, and we're going to be getting their feedback on the proposals themselves as we go through the process. And the idea is, how do we in philanthropy not just work in isolation, but incorporate the communities that we're working with in our decision-making process? So when looking at our community advisors, we wanted to get kind of a spread of different aspects of the community, from educators to policy to students. So just quickly introducing the members of the committee, the community advisors. So Shagun Kaur is a community college faculty member working in communications at De Anza, is also a project facilitator with the Academic Senate of the California Community Colleges OER Committee, and an open textbook author. Winnie Zhang is currently a law student, but before she started law school, was working at Spark, which works broadly within the OER community, and was a student leader working on textbook affordability issues in Texas. Dr. Richard Sebastian works at Achieving the Dream and is the director of open and digital learning. Dr. Leslie Kennedy is at the CSU system as the assistant vice chancellor, and has played a really key role in the Affordable Learning Solutions program they have throughout the system. Caitlin Vitez formerly was the US PIRG Higher Education Affordability Campaign Director. Also worked at the American Association of University Professors and is now at the Department of Higher Education as a liaison for higher education, or the US Department of Education as a liaison for higher education, and has worked extensively in researching the role that automatic textbook billing has played, and with kind of a key part in the broader understanding of inclusive access and automatic textbook billing. So kind of a look at the evaluation process itself. So once you submit your LOI, the grant committee is going to do an initial assessment. And then from the initial assessment, about 25% will move into the next round and will notify you on whether or not your proposal has moved into the next round. The proposals that move on from there will be asked to complete a full application. The full applications will be assessed by the Spark community advisors. And then we will be scheduling follow-up calls with those that advance to the final stage of the grant committee. And then from there, the decision will come from 6 weeks from the proposals closing. So here you have like more of a visual timeline of what that's going to look like, from the LOI being received to the final decision being made. It's a pretty clear path, and we're going to keep people updated on every stage on where they're application or LOI is at in the process.
And then two things that I'll just quickly add about kind of our process, what it's looked like in the past. So first of all, the LOI, and again, this is available to download on our Spark Grants website right now, but the real meat and potatoes of that is a 500-word abstract around what the project is, what the impact would be, how you would measure that, what the budget is. So we try to make a very low bar to submit an LOI where y'all aren't doing hours and hours of paperwork. And then that full application is much more detailed in terms of things that we're asking. As Kaylin mentioned, generally about 25% move forward to that full application. In terms of total number of LOIs that we've received, lately it's been in the like 35 to 45 range. And generally we're looking to fund 3 to 4 proposals a funding cycle, just depending on how aligned those are with what we're looking to fund. So now I'll let Kaylin talk a little bit about some of the past OER awardees that we have received, again, so that y'all can just get a better sense of the types of projects that we propose or that we fund, excuse me.
So just starting with US PIRG. So before I was in this role, I was actually over at US PIRG as the Affordable Textbooks Campaign Director. But I think that one of the really good examples that illustrate the Spark aspect of the grant is the inclusive access report that our grant funded, looking at the textbooks industry's newer practice of automatically billing students for their materials. It analyzed contracts between institutions and the booksellers. It kind of looked at what is really in those contracts. And then from there, other organizations and individuals have been able to use that work to really expand on what is being done around this automatic textbook billing more broadly, including lawsuits that were filed by students and booksellers, as well as some other things that we're investigating it. And then Spark, which works to support systems of research and education that are open and works primarily with libraries, took some of that work from US PIRG, took other work that they were doing, and was able to build out inclusiveaccess.org, which is an excellent resource for students, educators, and administrators to get a full picture of the impact of automatic textbook billing, as well as pulling in other members of the community, including academic senates, organizations representing institutions, as well as others within the open space to create kind of a fuller look at what is going on the ground and what you can do about it. And then ISKME, which is the Institute for the Study of Knowledge Management and Education, we funded a grant that looks at 2 guidebooks and a series of webinars for faculty to integrate OER into their online education. We also funded some of their work in the Bay Area, filling gaps, looking at what gaps exist within OER to get students into higher earning career pathways, and making sure that there were materials available for those students. And then California State University Channel Island has become a leader in open education with their zero textbook cost degree pathway that they created. Their Open CI initiative, which was part of that, has already saved students over $5 million. And then the grant that they got through one of our Spark cycles funded the creation of the California Alliance for Open Education, which is working to unite the 3 public systems within California to expand collaboration and to really be a resource for educators within the state who want to do more on open.
Thanks, Kaylin. I'm just going to quickly highlight some non-OER Spark grantees. Oh, apologies, y'all. The slide deck is not cooperating this morning. But I thought that they would, again, give you a better sense of the types of work, even though they're not OER related, that proposals have been successful. The first that I'll highlight is the Public Policy Institute of California. We've actually given them 2 Spark grants, but the first Spark grant that we gave them was to look at state data and examining digital divide equity gaps from spring 2020, when the pandemic started, to spring 2021. And out of that report came policy recommendations. So again, a great example, very similar to the PERG report that Kaylin talked about, of research that is able to scale by informing policy, informing advocacy, and having sort of a life just beyond being a piece of research. CSU Long Beach is an organization that we funded through our Student Basic Needs Initiative. They are working to develop a best practice model for family-friendly campuses, particularly focused on pregnant and parenting students. So they'll be creating ally trainings, disseminating training materials across the CSU system. So again, something that was funded at one school, but has the potential to expand across the entire CSU system and beyond. UCI Lifted. This is the first University of California program that will actually deliver bachelor's degrees in an in-prison setting. So we were part of a large group of funders that came in, and one of our Spark grants helped to seed the initial planning work that went into building out this degree pathway in a prison setting within the UC system. Those students will actually be matriculating into the UC system this fall and starting their journey. They were previously attending classes via Southwest College, again, still in an in-prison setting. And so this is a great example of a pilot program that we've helped to fund that we hope has the ability to grow beyond just UCI, but to other UCs across the state and other prisons across the state. And then California Competes. They are working to update their California Post-Secondary to Prosperity dashboard, specifically with disaggregated data related to incarceration. So this dashboard already existed and looked at a bunch of different metrics, but hadn't necessarily particularly focused on whether individuals have been incarcerated or not. So again, this is kind of a project that had already existed that's looking to expand and is very well aligned with the focus area that we do. And I should also mention that project has a lot of ability to then inform policy and policymakers. So that is kind of our presentation for today. We'll open it up to questions. So again, if you please have a question, drop them in the Q&A section. I know I've answered a few, just kind of responding via typing, but I'll answer this next one. Can you specify more about what California focus/impact is? If projects have nationwide impact, would that automatically imply regional impact in California? Great question. Yes, I think if there is a project that has a nationwide focus, obviously that would impact California. It would be helpful for us to get a sense of what you see that particular impact in California being, or how the impact in California sort of fits within that larger nationwide impact. Inclusiveaccess.org website, or the PERG report that Kaylin mentioned. Both of those obviously had an impact that is much broader than the state of California, but had an impact on California students. Next question. Would you all consider funding applications from for-profit companies if we were to partner with a college university? Good question, Ted. I would say, maybe. It would really just depend on what the project was. Generally, we would probably look to route our dollars through that educational institution. So maybe email us, a brief description of what you're thinking, and we can take a look at it. The one thing that I should mention is we're definitely open to connecting with individuals prior to them submitting an LOI. So if you want to shoot us an email, with kind of a quick summary of what you're thinking of submitting, we can provide some feedback. We're happy to hop on a quick 30-minute call with individuals and kind of talk through what they're thinking. My whole goal is to lessen the burden, lessen the amount of time that nonprofits spend on submitting grants. I used to work for a nonprofit. I know that's not the best part of the job. So if we can hop on a quick 30-minute phone call with y'all and say, I don't know if this is the right fit for us, I would recommend not submitting an LOI. Or conversely, yes, this is very aligned with what we're interested in. Please make sure you include information X, Y, and Z to get kind of a better, more holistic picture. Kaylin, this next question might be for you. Could you expand more on the kind of research you're looking to fund in your last bullet point for your funding interest? Would this research need to go through an IRB, for example, Institutional Review Board? Or could it be done by surveys, et cetera? And as a reminder to those of you listening, that last bullet point was research that identifies the impacts of open educational resources have on student outcomes, including retention and success.
I think that this would kind of depend on what the scope of it is and what the goal of this particular project would be. But typically, no. Typically, a lot of the research that we have funded has not gone through an IRB and has had more of a targeted audience of the general public rather than an institutional research bent. It's often about making sure that the broader public understands what these things can do, or that, for example, the people making the decisions on policies can understand these issues, than more of an internal academic audience.
And then the next question is from Danielle. We are trying to roll out OERs within our college program for incarcerated students. Would use the data of impacts, I think they're asking, would the data on impacts to help improve access to OERs across other prisons, does this align? Oh, would use the data on impacts to help improve access. Okay, I understand, sorry. That was bad reading on Ryan's part. So they would use the data on impacts to help improve access to OERs across other California prisons. Does this align? Kaylin, maybe I'll defer to you again on that one.
I think that this would be this is like a very good example of if you want to hop on a 30-minute call so you can learn a little bit more about what you're picturing and what the scope of it would be. This is something that I would personally be very interested in learning more about. I can't really speak on whether or not it fits within this funding cycle. We also have funding cycles on smart justice specifically. And I know that the Smart Justice Program Director, Kenya, and I have been talking about ways to work together on this issue. So I do encourage you to just reach out directly because I'd like to learn more.
Yeah, I would agree. I think even if it's not a good fit for the Spark Grant funding cycle, we would probably be interested in just having a conversation to learn more about the work that you're doing. Does the process ever lead to a suggestion from your team around partnerships/collaborations, i.e. work together with XYZ organization to improve the impact improve the quality of the work? Yes, to a suggestion from your, yes, I mean, we certainly, with organizations that apply, if there are partnerships, organizations that we know that would be a good fit for a partnership for someone applying, we'll certainly look to facilitate those conversations and help to facilitate those introductions. So hopefully that is the answer to the question. But again, if I'm not answering that or interpreting the question correctly, please feel free to email us. Question is, can you please go over the LOI? You have mentioned being able to download the LOI early. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Let me pull up my other screen, and then I will share where you can get access to that. So just give me one moment. So hopefully you're seeing our Spark Grant webpage. But if you go to 20mm, you can click on the Spark Grants tab, or if you can go directly there. As you'll see here, these are links to PDFs of the LOI and the full application. So if you click that, it will bring you to a PDF version of the LOI that you can review. As you can see, the vast majority of this is sort of very basic information from y'all in terms of demographics and where you are located, who's the right person, whether you've submitted previously. You'll select which of the targets you're looking to address. You can select multiple of these. I would say it doesn't necessarily give you a leg up in the process if you were to select multiple. I think what we're really looking for is, what is aligned. And then again, I think the real kind of meat and potatoes of the LOI are these two questions here, 500 words around sort of the general project, and then 200 words about, how, if at all, it would impact public policy. So yeah, again, those are available to download, and you all can, get started on prepping. This button will change within the next week or so to be submit a proposal, and then it will be live on May 17th. There's also that full application to download as well, so you can take a look. It says it on top of the full application, but just as a reminder, we will have specific questions based on your LOI included in the full application. So it won't just be those questions on the PDF, but it will also be additional questions based on our questions that we have in reviewing your LOI. All right. What are ideas / examples of the type of work you want to support around ZTC implementation? Would setting up OER initiatives at institutions or offering professional development training to support adoption / creation be a good fit? Kaylin, I'll defer that one to you again.
Yeah, so I think once again, this would be another great way, another good example of something that I would love to have a one-on-one conversation about. But I think that some of the overarching ideas are, is this something that could be taken and run with? Is this something that's going to have a broader impact than one particular campus or one particular region? Is this something that maybe other campuses would then be duplicating? Is this going to spur campuses to work together to have a broader impact? Is this a pilot of a program? So I think that there are lots of ways that we could implement OER through the ZTC program. And I know that personally, I'm very interested in people being creative here or looking at problems that exist or get in the way of people implementing open, and then are looking for ways to solve some of those problems, to remove barriers for faculty or educators. And that's kind of the things that I'm really interested in personally. But I would love to hear more about what you're thinking and what direction you're going in.
And I'm just looking at some of the chat that we've received, and we have a few of our Spark community advisors on the call with us today. And I think one point that was brought up by one of them was, those Spark community advisors, getting back to the previous question, will also be able to help facilitate conversations and introductions and new partnerships for organizations that put forth an LOI. So yes, appreciate that point being raised. It seems like we've answered, one more. To be clear, the LOI guidelines are available May 17th and the LOI is due June 1st. Yes, so again, the LOI you can download, you can start working on it. It is available, all of the questions are there. You would not be able to submit it until May 17th. You can submit it on May 17th, you can submit it on May 18th, 19th, all the way till June 1st. Once 11:59 p.m. Pacific time hits on June 1st, we will no longer be accepting LOIs for this cycle. So hopefully that clarified the process. I will give it another minute, but it seems like all of the questions have been answered.
I do realize that the slideshow doesn't have my contact information, so I'm putting it in the chat as well.
Great. Our emails are pretty easy. It's Kaylin@20mm or Ryan@20mm. So please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to connect, discuss more. But thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and we look forward to reviewing your proposals. Have a great day.